Good afternoon, children. Today we want to discuss the regular and irregular forms of the verb in the past tense. Please find your textbook and go to page 57 so that we can start working from there. That will be our starting point. Find the page first, then I'll continue speaking. Right, I assume that we're all on the same page now. On top of page 57, you'll see the heading Regular and Irregular Verbs in the Simple Past Tense. Now, we all know that when you change a sentence from the present tense to the past tense, something happens to the verb. There are quite a few regular verbs that you know well by now, and all we do with them is we add a simple D or ED at the end of the verb when we switch tenses. For instance, a verb like pull. I pulled the cart yesterday. I pulled the cart today. Another word like I jumped today, present tense. I jumped yesterday, past tense. Can you see that we simply added an ed to that verb? Yet another example. I smile today, but I smiled yesterday. We added a d there. So in the simple past tense, we simply add a d or ed to the verb when we switch tenses. But that is when we deal with a regular verb, like the ones we've mentioned. Verbs like pull, jump, yell, smile, and walk. We simply add a d or ed from the simple present tense to the simple past tense. But we want to focus our attention today on the irregular verbs, meaning those verbs where the form of the verb changes completely when we switch from the simple present tense to the simple past tense. In other words, you don't simply add a D or DE. You change the whole form of the verb. Now, on page 57, in that column on top of the page, you will see two columns there. It says irregular verbs do not follow this rule. Here are some examples. I want to go through some of them with you. Now, the simple present tense verb tell becomes told in the simple past tense. I tell a lie today, but I told a lie yesterday. Can you see the form of the verb changes? That's why we call it an irregular verb. You don't simply add an ed or a d to the verb tell. You cannot say, I told an innocent lie yesterday. You have to say, I told a lie yesterday. Let's look at the other examples. See, in the present tense, becomes saw in the past tense because it's an irregular verb. Creep becomes crept. Take becomes took. As you'll see in your book, hold becomes held. I hold the baby today. I held the baby yesterday. It's an irregular verb. The whole verb changes from the present tense to the past tense. Throw. I throw the ball today. I threw the ball yesterday. Have and had. Other examples, do and did. Lead becomes led. And stand becomes stood. I stand in front of the house today. I stood in front of the house yesterday. Can you see there's a clear pattern emerging here? You don't simply add a d or ed at the end of the verb. When you switch from the present tense to the past tense, you change the whole verb itself. That's why we call it an irregular verb. It's not like there's a specific pattern. You have to be careful what you do with a verb when you switch tenses. I want you to look at the exercises on page 57 and please answer number 1, 2, and 3 in your books. Please go through them and find the irregular verbs or regular verbs in each sentence they give you there. What I think you could do to help you is if you go to the story, just back to page 54 and 55, I'm quickly going to read to you a short story there. All I want you to do there is listen and hear if you can hear any irregular verbs in this story. There are quite a few. The story is titled on page 54, Why Monkeys Have Flat Tummies. In the early days, the monkeys were not as thin and quick as they are today. They were fat little animals that moved slowly. Sankambi often crept up behind the monkeys and pulled their long tails. This made them furious, and they threw seeds and sticks at him. Sankambi decided to pay them back. "Dear friend," he said in a sweet voice, "up there on the mountain is a cave, and deep inside the cave is a beehive full of golden honeycomb. Follow me, I will show you the way." And the monkeys followed him. Notice the ed, followed, thinking of the delicious feast that was waiting for them. Please notice was. Was would be is in the present tense. It changed shape completely in the past tense. Next paragraph. I'm still on page 55. Sankambi led them to the mouth of a big cave. "Go inside, friends," he said. As soon as they were inside, Sankambi started to stamp his feet hard. "Watch out," he screamed. "The roof is starting to collapse. Stretch your arms up high and hold up the roof. I will run to fetch some poles." The monkeys did exactly that. They stood with their arms stretched up above their heads. Before we carry on, notice the word stood there. Stood would be stand in the present tense. It stood in the past tense. It changed completely, therefore stood is an irregular verb in the past tense. All through the day, in the heat and right through the night, there stood the monkeys like stone pillars. They were getting very tired. Notice were, you would say was in the present tense. Where was Sankambi? As morning came, notice came, it would be come in the present tense, it's came in the past tense. The eldest monkey realized that they had been tricked. He took one finger away, then another, then his whole hand and the other hand. One by one the monkeys lowered their aching arms, and when they looked down at their bodies, they no longer had fat tummies. After all the hard work trying to hold up the roof of the cave, their tummies had become flat. Notice the word had. It would be have in the present tense. It's an irregular verb, so it's had in the past tense. And that is why, even today, monkeys are able to swing between the trees so quickly. I hope you've noticed all the irregular verbs in this passage, and I hope that you'll have fun doing the exercises on page 57. Goodbye.